It's time to get your tinfoil hats out again, because we're going to be jumping into a good old conspiracy theory. You heard that right. I generally think that Fresh Start Worlds was one big experiment by Jagex to test various things and effects within the game. And in this video, I'm going to be telling you why I think that. So, let's talk about it. Yo, what's going on guys? My name is Valric and today we're going to be talking about Fresh Start Worlds and why I genuinely think that it was an experiment. I've had this thought ever since Fresh Start Worlds kind of released and the way the game mode was set up, but now that it's all said and done, I think it's the perfect time to really talk about it and jump into my perspective. Because that is very important. I want to put a big old disclaimer here. This is not facts. I'm not saying Jagex has actually done this. These are just ideas and thoughts that I have and I want to throw out there. Some of them are based on things that Jagex have said in the past. However, I don't want to say that these are facts, 100% confirmed by Jagex or whatever, because I don't want to spread misinformation within the community. But if you're going to enjoy this video, definitely consider giving it a like. Join in the discussion in the comment section down below. Do you think that I'm right? Do you think I'm completely off? What do you think was the purpose of Fresh Start Worlds? And are Jagex, maybe not telling us certain things? Let me know in the comment section down below. Subscribe if you're new. Follow me on Twitch. I stream every day at 6 PM game time. Join the Discord. And without further ado, let's get into the video. I think it's important to start at the beginning. RuneScape is a game that has been released in 2001, created by the Gower brothers. In all seriousness though, let's start at the initial Fresh Start World post that got released, or well, actually leaked before the real post got released with the information and the way the competition is set out now, because the initial post was actually a little bit different. I will try and flash an image on screen if I can find one. I was looking before I started recording, but I couldn't really find it. I will ask around a little bit if someone has it saved somewhere, but if not, please trust me, because pretty much the initial post was stating that the competition part, which is if you finish rank 100 or higher in the first 8 weeks of Fresh Start Worlds, you will get a special halo called I think it was called the Challenger Halo. But anyway, it was a different halo. It's cool, it's tradable, probably goes for a lot of money, and it's just cool to have, right? Like, a little competition part, nothing wrong with it, but there was going to be MTX in it initially. And obviously that sparked a lot of backlash, because why is there MTX in a competition thing? We could just buy ranks. That is terrible. And they removed it in the actual post that released the day after. But I generally think it didn't just get leaked. I think Jagex leaked it on purpose, or at least showed it to someone that they hope would leak it on purpose, so that they could test the waters and then change it later. Because if you didn't know, the boons and the boosts that the Fresh Start Worlds in RuneScape 3 has were actually supposed to be in the old school one as well, but they removed it because it sparked some controversy within the RuneScape 3 one and eventually in the old school one as well, because the Fresh Start Worlds post for RuneScape 3 was released before the old school one. Old school was already announced to have a Fresh Start Worlds one, and the old school people were angry about the RuneScape 3 boost possibly going and coming into the old school one, so they didn't have that. But I don't think that is the biggest thing that goes on here. But one thing I do want to point out, and I think a lot of people will say in general, is that Fresh Start Worlds was just simply a money grab. And I don't think that is true. I generally do believe, all conspiracy theory and joking aside, that Jagex generally wants to do this to get new people in. It has shown within multiple games and in general within how people think, right? That if you have a fresh start, it is more accessible for people to jump in because they feel less behind. Even though that mindset isn't really true, because experienced players will always be further ahead anyway, it feels nicer and people can, do the early money game or early money makers within the game to make money, instead of, feeling that cutting logs is not good anymore because everyone is on to way better and bigger things, right? I generally think that is true. However, I also think that the money grabbing thing doesn't really apply to it, because let's be honest, if they really wanted to money grab it, they would have kept the MTX within the competition part, or they would have just released those skill capes within the actual main game to another event, probably via MTX, and have people get them that way, or a wrapping paper event that works very poorly or whatever, like how the current one does. Whatever, they would have thought of something and put it in the game that way and made a lot more money, because a lot more people could interact with it, because a lot more people play the main game, right? So I don't think that is necessarily the goal of this anyway. And I think one of the things that doesn't make sense even with it is, why have it paid if you want to get new players in? And people might not want to invest that money if you need, or you might not want to invest the time if they need to invest the money. But just wanted to get that out of the way because I know it will come up in the comment section below. But I think the biggest conspiracy here is that it was just one big old testing ground for Jagex to see various aspects and just effects within the game and how that would affect the general game, and maybe if they can introduce it to the main game. One thing that came to mind 100%, no pun intended, is the accuracy boost. If you didn't know, there is a 100% accuracy boost or higher accuracy within Fresh Start Worlds on everything, like literally everything. And I think that is them trying to test things and test the waters to see if they can remove auras, because we all know that auras are a bit of a problem. Some people feel like you cannot PvM without auras at all, but even so, I'm someone who doesn't really use auras because I don't want to be relying on them. I know it's a bit of a weird mindset, but that's just my mindset, right? I've talked about this in a previous video. However, I do have to admit that if you want to have proper hit chance, you will have to have accuracy and damage and boosting auras active, because otherwise you just splash on a lot of bosses. And I think with having increased accuracy or 100% accuracy, or whatever you want to call it, within Fresh Start Worlds, it is at them testing how does this affect boss fights, right? How does this affect items coming into the game? Because with more accuracy, that would usually mean more bosses are being killed every single hour, so that means more items are coming into the game, which giving them less value. And obviously you want certain items to keep their value. You don't want the Praxoff Armadillo going from, I think it's 3 bill right now, to like 1 bill. That's not what you want. But if it goes from 3 bill to 2.5 bill, that's a lot more acceptable. And I think that's something they've really looked at and probably are looking at right now, the stats. So what does this mean for boss kills? What does this mean for the boss fights in general? Do certain mechanics not hold up anymore? Is it too easy to skip mechanics now? All these things I think they're looking at, because they have set out on Twitter and on live streams in the past, they are wanting to look at the accuracy idea within RuneScape and how it works and change it. Maybe not go to 100% accuracy, but tweak it here and there. Maybe find a middle ground between full accuracy and what we have right now. And they also said that auras are a bit of a problem as well. But as I said, I think that Necromancy can fix that as well. However, another thing is, I think they're also looking at the relevance of skills and the XP rates. And that sounds strange in a game mode that had increased XP rates, right? However, in the competition, you can see how many people got 99s, 120s in each skill, and there's a clear divide in certain skills getting 99s and 120s, and other ones. Obviously, the combat ones were out there because of ED3, and thieving as well, because it's really AFK and really good experience rate, but things like woodcutting, for example, are very, very little 99s and other skills as well. Is that because the cape is not that relevant? Or does it have something to do with how the skills work, or people not wanting to put in time to do those skills? You could argue that the skills are just not, or the capes are not pretty enough. However, things like the Divination Cape are beautiful, but there are not a lot of people having it because the experience rates are not that quick. I think they might also be looking at certain skills and being like, hey, how can we tweak or how can we increase the experience rates, and how does it affect the game, for example? They can now see what happens when people have 4 times the experience, and hey, is that something? I don't think we're going to get a 4 times experience weekend or something, but more so in like, okay, this skill becomes so much more quicker. Is that the pace we want that skill to go in? Or do we want the skill to be a bit less quick, or, you know, is experience like maybe needs to be tweaked like by another incremental amount or whatever? That's one thing that I think they could be looking at, and also just how relevant the training is, because you could also argue that the skill isn't fun to train, so people are not training it, right? Because combat is fun, so a lot of people have combat skills at 120, plus the capes are really sick as well, but that's an idea regarding skills. However, I think the economy is something to take into account as well, because I think that there are a few things they're looking at within the economy. Because obviously the economy is a big topic right now with the dev cost, with the gold sync that came from the GE tax and stuff. Great stuff. Love it. Nothing wrong with it. However, I do think that they're still looking at little things here and there. And I think one of those things are the boons that you had active. Pretty much they were like passive boosts that you would be getting, like a 20% increased gather rate, or you have more chance to save ammunition like runes and arrows, or more AFK stuff. So instead of cooking 60 items, you can cook 120 items. Obviously if they were stackable, or well, logs are probably a better example with proteins, or just cooking as well with proteins, actually, now I think about it, because cooking has proteins as well. You get the point. You could just increase the amount that you could do AFK. I think these are things that they're testing and seeing if it's something they could add into the main game, because, you know, RuneScape is moving more and more to AFK stuff. I mean, doubling the amount you can do regarding actions without your inventory or within your inventory is something really nice, right? Like, I think that's the thing that a lot of people would enjoy, if you can just cook more, especially with proteins and stuff, compared to what you can do now. And making that more AFK, and even with the ammunition save chance, is that something they could even increase even more on top of what we already have, or is it good that it's getting sunk? Because, for example, with water runes right now, they're sitting at over 200 GP. Is that where you want water runes to be sitting, or not? I don't know. I don't mind, because the Fractal Armadillo is really powerful with the spell that you, Inside Fear, that you'll be using. So it's up to them. I don't think everything should be dirt cheap to do, but it's just something to consider, right? And I think that's something they are looking into. But I think the increased gather rate is something even more interesting to look at, because Jagex has actively been trying to increase the amount of supplies that come through skilling. Look at the farming rework, look at the divination rework. We talked about this before, right? Like, everyone, I think, is aware of the idea of gathering supplies within RuneScape. What if this increased, like the 20%, they could see how many supplies are getting into the game with it, with the amount of skilling people do, and see if that is actually something they would want in the actual main live game, and what effect it would have on the economy. Obviously, the economy of Fresh Start Worlds is relative to the RuneScape 3 one, because it's a lot different. Other items are more relevant because it's like a fixed time period when you could play. So obviously people might not be doing the more boring tasks within RuneScape, right? But I generally think that they can probably do some maths with those numbers and figure out if it's good or bad for the game. And another thing is, and I think that's the last thing that I really want to be touching on, I think this was also a test for a future league, right? Leagues are extremely popular in old school RuneScape. If you somehow don't know what a league is, it's kind of like Fresh Start Worlds, but it's more with gimmicks or whatever. For example, there was an old school RuneScape league where you started in the main area, so like Varrock, Lumbridge, whatever, free-to-play area, let's call it that. And then you could unlock areas, but within the league, you could only unlock 3 areas in total, plus your starting area, which pretty much made it so, okay, am I going to Godboard, or am I going to Barrows, for example? Or am I going to be doing both? Or am I going to skip Barrows and go straight to Godboard? Which was a very interesting concept. I think that would be sick for RuneScape 3, right? But I also think that a lot of people get burned out after a league, at least in old school, because the increased experience rates, and you know, you just build your account and whatever, and then it just gets removed, because that is usually what happens. Your account gets removed after it, you get a trophy, you get some cosmetics within the real game, which is cool and all, but yeah, at least I always get burned out after an old school league, which is fine because it happens, right? But it's still a lot of fun. But I think they're also looking at, okay, if we have these increased experience rates and these gather rates or whatever, what happens when we put it in the main game? It just happened last week as of me making this video and releasing this video, and I don't feel like the economy has changed a lot, which is also difficult to say because the Grand Exchange Tax was released at the exact same time, right? But we have to see the long-term effect. But if the long-term effect is actually not that negative, because you could also argue that those people that play Fresh Start Worlds or whatever league comes in the future will probably not be actively playing or grinding out bosses or whatever brings in the most items within the game in the actual main game, so the items will not be coming into, like, for example, if 10 people are gathering 10,000 magic locks through bossing in Fresh Start Worlds, they're probably not gathering those 10,000 locks in the main game, which they'd probably be doing if Fresh Start Worlds wasn't a thing, right? So I don't know how that works, but that's something that the future will have to tell. But what if you can transfer your league account, obviously without the boost, to the main game, and then you have another alt? And especially for new players, that might be a great way to jump into RuneScape, have this gimmicky kind of league thingy going on, enjoy that, and then go into the actual main game and continue on playing. Who knows? That's just an idea, right? And I think it's just in general, I think that leagues for RuneScape 3 would be huge, especially if they make it playable from your already existing members account, like they do in old school RuneScape, because that would even make old school RuneScape players try the RuneScape 3 leagues. But those are just some of my ideas. It's a bit of a long video, so I really hope you guys do enjoy it. If you do, generally give it a like, and let me know in the comment section down below what you think of it. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And subscribe if you're new. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Goodbye.